You've bought yourself a pair of Nubuck leather boots. So how should you look after them? We'll start with what Nubuck really is. So it's still full grain leather. It's not suede. They're two very different things. So this is a normal leather, right? But it's been buffed and sanded. So it gives it that lifted nap texture. So it's more durable than suede and has a better texture and nicer look compared to sort of smooth full grain leather. The products I'll be using in this video are coming from a range of brands, right? So I've got from Nubuck and from Granger's. They're all essentially the same sort of thing. I just prefer Granger's for the general cleaning and reproofing, just because I find they're a bit stronger. And we'll move on to the conditioning stuff in a second. So the products you can use will cover a different range of things. With Nubuck leather, they can dry out quite quickly and start to crack if you don't look after them properly. So that's why I've got 4 products here. I've got a cleaner. So that's going to clean the boot. I've got a repellent and conditioner. So that's what I'll use between sort of uses. So that's going to reproof the Gore-Tex inside the boot, as well as condition the leather so it doesn't crack. I've then got just a general repellent if I need to top up at any point. And then I've got a conditioner for specific Nubuck leather as well. The first thing you want to do with a dirty pair of boots is, you can see here I've sort of got some mud and dried up bits just sat on the leather. First thing you're going to do is just get a brush and brush it all off. It doesn't have to be a sort of special brush, a regular sort of brush will do, but if you can find a Nubuck specific brush, that is even better. Cool, so the brush I've got here is actually part of a dry clean kit from Timberland. It's the same sort of thing really, so just go over the boot and brush off all of that dirt that's been sort of built up on it. So the first thing we're going to do with the boots is delace them. So we're going to just take the laces out so we can have full access to the boot, and then also clean the laces. Cool, so I've taken the laces out and I've just prepared here a solution with just some detergent, just a bit of warm water, and I'm just going to put the laces in there and soak them up in this liquid. The laces are now soaking. They're going to stay soaking while we clean the rest of the boot. I've got here just a large bowl of sort of warm water and a sponge. The reason we want the boots to be damp is so that this spray can stick in and really get into there and clean the leather out properly. Just going to start spraying on. You can be quite generous with this spray. I tend to do one section at a time, just so that I can then grab this same sponge and just work it in. You'll be able to see as I apply more water, it's going to start to foam up. You can see that that's what it should look like when it's all foamed up. Once you've finished going over that whole boot with the sponge or the cloth, and you can see that white foam sort of start to build up, you can let it sit for a little bit and let it work its way into the leather. One thing you really want to be careful of is not to press too hard or be too rough with the motions, just because that can destroy the sort of nap that's on the Nubuck. Another reason why I quite like using a sponge is because although my boots aren't particularly dirty right now, if they were caked in mud sort of thing, and under the sole, this is just a bit of grass in there, I'm not too bothered about that. I could take that rougher part of the sponge and go over on the side of the boot and just really scrape it off. Nubuck is really sensitive, however, so it's really easy to go wrong. That's why I'd never use like a rough material on the top of the leather itself. This is the point where it differs. If you're doing a sort of routine clean, which should be every sort of 2 to 3 wears, I would recommend using something potentially like this. The General Footwear Repel. It's not a conditioner because the boot doesn't need to be conditioned. It depends very heavily on the terrain, so if it's just sort of dry hill walking, it's just a bit dusty sort of thing, I wouldn't suggest potentially using a specialized conditioner. With this, you want to wait for the boot to not be fully saturated but a bit damp, and then you would spray it on, leave it to dry, wipe off the excess, and then that's finished. So it's quite simple using this. You just spray it on, let it set for a couple of minutes, and then wipe it off. If it's been a slightly more heavy use, maybe you've been trekking through some rivers, things like that, or if you've been up in Scotland through a peat bog, I would really recommend using at least this form of conditioner. So it's the Footwear Repel Plus, and it's a durable repellency and conditioner which is suitable for Gore-Tex, which is what we need. So this sort of thing is really useful. If you've been through a river, your boots are going to get dried out because of all the minerals and things like that in the water. Especially if you're up and around in Scotland, it's really easy to let your boots dry out and crack. So really recommend using this if you think your boots are going to get dry and crack. And what we'll be using today, depending on the sort of frequency that you use your boots, a specific conditioner. Now what that will do, it's going to restore the oils inside of the leather, and it will prevent the boot from cracking. Now I'd recommend, depending on how heavily you use the boot, every 3 to 6 months to use something specific like this. After you've applied something like this, I'm not going to use the boots for maybe another week or so. I would always, if you're unsure or after a light sort of use, just use the general Repel just as a top up before you go out. Once you've gone and applied the conditioner, you can just let it sit for a little while, but I'm personally just going to put on some repellent on top of that for when I do use the boots next. With this specific Granger stuff, you just want to apply evenly and then wipe off any excess. So once that's on there, you can let it sit for a couple seconds and then grab, again this is the same damp sponge, and just wipe off any surface excess. When you've finished applying everything, it's really important with Nubuck leather that you keep it out of direct sort of heat, so don't put it next to any radiator or anything like that. I recommend storing them in a cool, dry place. Let them dry naturally. Don't ever use a hair dryer or anything like that. So if you are cleaning them or reproofing them right before you go out, make sure to leave 1 or 2 days for the leather to fully dry before you go using it. Another hack that you can do is just, especially if you've washed the inside of the boot as well, just fill the inside with some blue roll or just tissue paper, and that will help dry out any of the moisture that's gotten on the inside of the boot.